Mrs. Gable loved her house. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. The walls were painted a warm yellow, like sunshine on a summer day. Her comfy armchair sat right next to the window, perfect for reading. She had a garden full of bright flowers, and every morning, she'd drink her tea and watch the birds flit about. Her house felt like a warm hug. Inside were all her favorite things, photos of her grandchildren, her collection of teacups, and the handmade quilt her mother had made for her. Each object held a special memory, a piece of her life woven into the very fabric of her home. Every morning, Mrs. Gable followed the same routine. She'd wake up, make a cup of Earl Grey tea, and sit in her armchair to read the newspaper. After that, she'd tend to her garden, watering the roses and chatting with the friendly robin that always visited. In the afternoon, she might bake cookies or visit with her neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. She lived on a quiet street, where everyone knew each other. They waved hello, helped each other with groceries, and kept an eye on each other's houses. It was the kind of neighborhood where you could leave your door unlocked without a worry. Mrs. Gable felt safe and secure in her little haven. She loved the familiar creak of the floorboards, the way the sunlight streamed through the windows, and the comforting scent of lavender that always seemed to linger in the air. Her home was more than just a building, it was an extension of herself, a place where she could relax, be herself, and feel truly at peace. She cherished her belongings, not because they were expensive, but because they represented her life and the people she loved. Her grandmother's silver locket, her husband's old watch, the children's drawings taped to the refrigerator, each item told a story, a piece of her heart made visible. She felt like everything was in its place, and she had everything she needed. Life was simple, but good. Little did she know, that peaceful life was about to be shattered. The sense of security she held so dear was about to be challenged, and her cozy home would soon feel like a place of violation and fear. The Tuesday started like any other. Mrs. Gable watered her petunias, chatted with Mrs. Henderson about the upcoming bake sale, and then headed out to the grocery store. She planned to make her famous apple pie for the weekend. When she returned a few hours later, the front door was slightly ajar. A chill ran down her spine. She never left the door unlocked, not even for a minute. Hesitantly, she pushed it open, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" Silence. She stepped inside, and her heart leaped into her throat. The living room was a disaster. Cushions were ripped from the sofa, her teacups were smashed on the floor, and the drawers of her antique desk were pulled out, their contents scattered everywhere. Tears welled up in her eyes. This wasn't right. This wasn't her home. Her safe, familiar haven had been violated. She stumbled through the house, her hands trembling. The television was gone from the family room, the jewelry box on her dresser was empty, and her husband's watch, the one he wore every day, was missing from its usual spot. A wave of nausea washed over her. It wasn't just the missing objects, it was the feeling of violation, the knowledge that someone had been in her space, touching her things, stealing her memories. She sank to the floor, sobbing. Her house, once a source of comfort and joy, now felt cold and empty. The sunshine streaming through the window seemed mocking, a cruel reminder of the happiness she had lost. After what felt like an eternity, she managed to pull herself together and call the police. Her voice trembled as she explained what had happened, her words punctuated by sobs. "They took everything," she cried. "Everything that mattered." As she waited for the police to arrive, she wandered through the wreckage, her heart aching with each broken object, each empty space. It wasn't just about the money or the possessions, it was about the loss of innocence, the shattering of her sense of security. Her home, her sanctuary, had been defiled. The feeling of safety she had taken for granted was gone, replaced by a gnawing fear that would linger long after the police had left and the mess had been cleaned up. The police arrived quickly, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow on the quiet street. Two officers, a young woman named Officer Johnson and a more seasoned man named Officer Davis, approached Mrs. Gable with concerned expressions. "Ma'am, can you tell us what happened?" Officer Davis asked gently, his voice calm and reassuring. Mrs. Gable, still shaken, recounted the events, her voice cracking with emotion. She pointed out the broken window in the back, the likely point of entry. Officer Johnson carefully dusted the window frame for fingerprints, while Officer Davis took notes, documenting the stolen items. They moved through the house methodically, taking pictures of the damage and collecting any potential evidence. Officer Johnson found a muddy footprint near the back door and carefully photographed it. They checked the locks on the windows and doors, noting that the back window lock had been forced open. "We'll do everything we can to find who did this, Mrs. Gable," Officer Davis assured her. "We'll take fingerprints, collect evidence, and talk to your neighbors. Hopefully, someone saw something." They spent hours at the house, meticulously gathering information. They asked Mrs. Gable about any suspicious activity she might have noticed in the days leading up to the burglary. She racked her brain, but couldn't recall anything out of the ordinary. As the officers worked, Mrs. Gable sat huddled in her armchair, wrapped in a blanket provided by Mrs. Henderson. She watched them, feeling a mix of gratitude and despair. She appreciated their efforts, but the thought of a stranger rummaging through her life still haunted her. Before leaving, Officer Davis handed Mrs. Gable a card with the case number and contact information. "We'll be in touch if we have any leads," he said. "In the meantime, try to stay with a friend or family member. Don't stay here alone tonight." As the police car pulled away, Mrs. Gable felt a wave of loneliness wash over her. The house felt cold and empty, a stark reminder of the violation she had suffered. The flashing lights were gone, but the fear lingered, casting a long shadow over her once peaceful home. She knew that even if the police caught the burglar and recovered her stolen items, things would never be quite the same. The sense of security she had cherished was gone, replaced by a deep-seated unease that would take a long time to heal. Weeks turned into months, and Mrs. Gable's hope dwindled with each passing day. The police called occasionally with updates, but there were no real leads. The fingerprints were smudged and incomplete, the muddy footprint offered little information, and none of the neighbors had seen anything suspicious. The stolen items were never recovered. Mrs. Gable filed a claim with her insurance company, but the money couldn't replace the sentimental value of the lost objects. Her grandmother's locket, her husband's watch, the photos of her grandchildren, they were irreplaceable. The break-in changed Mrs. Gable. She became more withdrawn, less trusting. She installed a security system and kept her doors locked at all times. The once familiar creak of the floorboards now made her jump, and every shadow seemed to conceal a potential threat. She stopped tending her garden as often. The joy she once found in nurturing her flowers had faded, replaced by a sense of vulnerability. The friendly robin still visited, but she no longer felt like chatting with it. The neighborhood, once a source of comfort and community, now felt less safe. She saw her neighbors, but avoided conversations, afraid that they would ask about the burglary and remind her of her loss. Sleep became a nightly battle. She would lie awake for hours, replaying the events in her mind, imagining the burglar in her house, touching her things. Nightmares haunted her, filled with shadowy figures and the sound of breaking glass. The warm yellow walls of her house now seemed to close in on her, suffocating her with memories of the violation. The sunshine streaming through the windows no longer brought joy, but rather a stark reminder of the happiness that had been stolen. Mrs. Gable felt like a prisoner in her own home. The burglary had taken more than just her possessions, it had stolen her peace of mind, her sense of security, and her joy for life. She longed for the days when she could leave her door unlocked without a worry, when she could tend her garden without fear, when she could sleep soundly through the night. But those days seemed like a distant dream, lost forever in the wreckage of her violated home. The case grew cold, just another unsolved crime in the city's files. And Mrs. Gable felt increasingly forgotten. Detective Miller was known for his persistence. He wasn't flashy or loud, but he had a quiet determination that often paid off. He'd been a detective for over 20 years, and he'd seen it all, the good, the bad, and the truly ugly. He was tired, yes, but he still cared. He still believed in justice. He was assigned to the cold case unit, a place where forgotten crimes gathered dust. Most detectives avoided it, preferring the excitement of fresh investigations. But Miller saw it differently. He saw a chance to give a voice to the voiceless, to bring closure to those who had been left behind. When Mrs. Gable's case landed on his desk, it was just another file among many. But as he read the details, he felt a pang of sympathy for the elderly woman. He imagined her in her cozy home, surrounded by her cherished possessions, and he couldn't bear the thought of her living in fear. He knew the odds were slim. Cold cases were notoriously difficult to solve. Evidence faded, witnesses moved on, and memories grew hazy. But Miller wasn't one to give up easily. He started by reviewing the original police report, carefully examining every detail. He reread the witness statements, analyzed the crime scene photos, and studied the list of stolen items. He looked for anything that might have been overlooked, any clue that could lead him to the burglar. He visited Mrs. Gable, offering her a kind smile and a listening ear. He asked her to recount the events of that day, hoping that something might jog her memory. He listened patiently as she described her fear and her loss. "I know it's been a long time, Mrs. Gable," he said, "but I promise you, I'm going to do everything I can to find who did this to you." He spent hours poring over the evidence, his brow furrowed in concentration. He felt a responsibility to Mrs. Gable, a desire to restore her sense of security and bring her peace of mind. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to try. He had a hunch, a feeling that something was there, hidden in the details, waiting to be discovered. He just had to find it. He decided to revisit the crime scene, hoping to see something the original investigators had missed. He walked through the house, imagining the burglar's movements, trying to understand his motives. And then, he noticed something small, something insignificant, that had been overlooked all along. A tiny red fiber, clinging to the carpet near the broken window. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead he had. Detective Miller carefully placed the tiny red fiber into a small evidence bag. It was barely visible to the naked eye, but he knew that even the smallest piece of evidence could be crucial. He labeled the bag meticulously, noting the date, time, and location where it was found. He knew that the fiber's analysis would be time-consuming and expensive, but he was convinced that it was worth the effort. He had a gut feeling that this seemingly insignificant clue could be the key to unlocking the entire case. He drove to the forensics lab, a sterile, brightly lit building on the outskirts of the city. The air inside smelled of chemicals and disinfectant. He walked down a long corridor, past rows of closed doors, until he reached the textile analysis unit. He handed the evidence bag to a young lab technician, explaining the circumstances of the case and the importance of the fiber. The technician nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of the detective's request. "We'll do everything we can, Detective Miller," she said. "We'll analyze the fiber's composition, color, and weave. We'll compare it to our database of known fibers. Hopefully, we can find a match." Detective Miller knew that the process would take time, but he was patient. He trusted the expertise of the forensic scientists. He knew that they would work tirelessly to extract every possible piece of information from the tiny red fiber. As he left the lab, he felt a flicker of hope. It was a long shot, but it was a start. He knew that solving a cold case was like piecing together a jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces. But he was determined to find those missing pieces, no matter how long it took. He imagined Mrs. Gable sitting alone in her house, still haunted by the burglary. He wanted to give her closure, to restore her sense of security, to let her know that she hadn't been forgotten. He carried the weight of that responsibility with him, driving him forward, one small clue at a time. The red fiber, a tiny speck of hope, was now in the hands of science, ready to reveal its secrets. Miller just had to wait. Sarah loved her job. As a forensic scientist, she was a detective of a different kind, piecing together clues at a microscopic level. Her lab was her sanctuary, filled with microscopes, spectrometers, and databases of every kind of material imaginable. She had a sharp mind and an even sharper eye, able to spot inconsistencies that others would miss. She received the small evidence bag from Detective Miller, noting the urgency in his request. She carefully opened the bag and examined the tiny red fiber under a powerful microscope. It was indeed small, almost invisible, but she could see that it was a synthetic fiber, likely acrylic. She began her analysis, carefully dissolving a small portion of the fiber in a chemical solution. She then used a spectrometer to analyze the chemical composition, comparing the results to her vast database. Hours turned into days as Sarah meticulously worked on the fiber. She ran test after test, her focus unwavering. She knew that Detective Miller was counting on her, and she was determined to deliver. Finally, after days of painstaking work, she had a breakthrough. The fiber was a unique type of acrylic, used in the manufacture of a specific brand of inexpensive hoodie. The hoodie was sold only at a few discount stores in the local area. She immediately called Detective Miller, her voice filled with excitement. "Detective, I have something," she said. "The red fiber is from a specific brand of hoodie, sold only at a few stores in town. It's a cheap brand, probably bought by someone looking for a bargain." Detective Miller was thrilled. This was the break he had been waiting for. "That's fantastic, Sarah," he said. "Can you give me the names of the stores?" Sarah provided the information, and Detective Miller immediately dispatched officers to the stores to review security footage. The tiny red fiber, once a seemingly insignificant clue, had suddenly become a powerful tool in the pursuit of justice. Sarah smiled, knowing that her work had made a difference. She was a silent guardian, a protector of the innocent, using her scientific skills to bring criminals to justice. And she was just getting started. Detective Miller felt a surge of adrenaline. He immediately contacted officers and dispatched them to the 3 discount stores Sarah had identified. He instructed them to review the security footage from the past few months, focusing on anyone who purchased the distinctive red hoodie. At the first store, the security footage was grainy and unclear. After hours of reviewing, they found nothing. The same was true at the second store. Disappointment began to creep in. But at the third store, a small shop called Bargain Bonanza, they struck gold. The security footage was much clearer, and after only a few minutes of reviewing, an officer spotted a young man purchasing a bright red hoodie. The young man looked to be in his late teens, with a slender build and short, dark hair. He paid for the hoodie in cash and then quickly left the store. The officer zoomed in on the young man's face, capturing a clear image. Detective Miller arrived at the store and reviewed the footage himself. He recognized the young man. It was Billy, a local teenager who had a history of petty theft and minor offenses. He wasn't a hardened criminal, but he was known to the police. Miller felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The tiny red fiber had led them to Billy. Now, all they had to do was find him and bring him in for questioning. He issued an alert for Billy, providing a description and the security footage image. He instructed officers to be on the lookout for him, emphasizing that he was wanted for questioning in connection with a burglary. It didn't take long for the police to find Billy. He was spotted hanging out with friends at a local park. Officers approached him cautiously, identified themselves, and informed him that he was wanted for questioning. Billy looked nervous and apprehensive, but he complied with the officers' instructions. He was taken into custody and transported to the police station for questioning. The red hoodie had become his undoing. The interrogation room was small and sterile, with a metal table and 2 chairs. Billy sat nervously, fidgeting in his seat. Detective Miller sat across from him, his expression calm but firm. "Billy," Detective Miller began, "we need to talk about the burglary at Mrs. Gable's house." Billy's eyes widened. "I don't know anything about that," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "We found a red fiber at the scene, Billy," Detective Miller continued. "A very specific type of red fiber that comes from a hoodie you bought at Bargain Bonanza." Billy's face paled. He remained silent. Detective Miller leaned forward. "We have you on security footage buying that hoodie, Billy. We know you were there." Billy continued to deny any involvement, but Detective Miller could see the fear in his eyes. He knew that Billy was lying. "Mrs. Gable is an elderly woman, Billy," Detective Miller said, his voice softening. "She was terrified. Her home was violated. She lost things that were very important to her." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "We just want to know what happened, Billy," he continued. "If you cooperate, things will be easier for you." Billy looked down at his hands, avoiding Detective Miller's gaze. He was clearly struggling with his conscience. Detective Miller waited patiently, allowing Billy to process the situation. He knew that pressuring him too much would only make him clam up. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Billy spoke. "Okay," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I was there." Detective Miller nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I didn't mean to scare her," Billy said. "I just needed some money. I was stupid." He confessed to breaking into Mrs. Gable's house, explaining that he had seen her leave that morning and knew she wouldn't be back for a few hours. He admitted to stealing the television, the jewelry, and her husband's watch. He said that he had pawned the stolen items at a local pawn shop, hoping to get enough money to pay off a debt. Detective Miller listened intently, taking notes. He knew that Billy's confession was a major breakthrough in the case. The red fiber had done its job. With Billy's confession in hand, Detective Miller moved quickly to recover Mrs. Gable's stolen possessions. He obtained a warrant to search the pawn shop where Billy claimed to have sold the items. The pawn shop owner, a burly man with a skeptical expression, initially denied any knowledge of the stolen goods. But when Detective Miller presented the warrant and Billy's confession, the owner reluctantly agreed to cooperate. After a thorough search of the shop, the police recovered the television, several pieces of jewelry, and Mrs. Gable's husband's watch. The grandmother's locket was missing. Billy said he'd sold it on the street for a few dollars. Detective Miller felt a surge of satisfaction. He knew that recovering the stolen items wouldn't erase the trauma Mrs. Gable had experienced, but it would bring her some measure of closure. He contacted Mrs. Gable and informed her that the case had been solved and that some of her belongings had been recovered. He could hear the relief in her voice. "Oh, Detective Miller, thank you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you so much. I can't tell you how much this means to me." Detective Miller arranged for Mrs. Gable to come to the police station to identify her recovered items. When she arrived, she was visibly shaken but also hopeful. She carefully examined each item, her eyes filling with tears. She clutched her husband's watch tightly, her fingers tracing its worn surface. "This was his favorite," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "He wore it every day." She also identified the jewelry and the television. Although the grandmother's locket was not recovered, she was grateful to have at least some of her possessions returned. Detective Miller watched her, feeling a sense of accomplishment. He had brought closure to Mrs. Gable, restoring her faith in justice. The tiny red fiber had led to Billy, Billy's confession had led to the recovered items, and the recovered items had brought Mrs. Gable a small measure of peace. The cycle was complete. Now, it was time for Billy to face the consequences of his actions. Billy was charged with burglary, theft, and criminal damage. His case went to court, where he pleaded guilty to all charges. The judge, a stern-faced woman with a reputation for fairness, listened carefully to the details of the case. She heard about Mrs. Gable's trauma, the violation of her home, and the loss of her cherished possessions. She also heard about Billy's difficult background, his struggles with poverty, and his lack of opportunities. During the sentencing hearing, Mrs. Gable was given the opportunity to speak. She stood before the court, her voice trembling slightly, and addressed Billy directly. "You took more than just my possessions, Billy," she said. "You took my peace of mind, my sense of security. You made me afraid in my own home." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I hope that you understand the harm that you have caused," she continued. "And I hope that you will use this experience to learn from your mistakes and make better choices in the future." Billy sat silently, his head bowed in shame. He avoided eye contact with Mrs. Gable. The judge then delivered her sentence. She sentenced Billy to 5 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 2 years. She also ordered him to pay restitution to Mrs. Gable for the value of her stolen items. The judge explained that her sentence was intended to punish Billy for his crimes, to deter others from committing similar offenses, and to provide Mrs. Gable with some measure of justice. As Billy was led away, Mrs. Gable felt a sense of closure. She knew that the sentence wouldn't erase the trauma she had experienced, but it would hold Billy accountable for his actions. She hoped that he would use his time in prison to reflect on his mistakes and to turn his life around. She also hoped that she could eventually forgive him and move on with her life. The red fiber had brought justice, but forgiveness was a journey she still had to take. In the months that followed Billy's sentencing, Mrs. Gable slowly began to rebuild her life. It wasn't easy. The trauma of the burglary lingered, casting a shadow over her once peaceful existence. She installed a new security system, more sophisticated than the last. She kept her doors locked at all times and was always vigilant about her surroundings. The familiar creak of the floorboards still made her jump, but the fear was slowly diminishing. She started tending her garden again, finding solace in the beauty of her flowers. The friendly robin still visited, and she began to chat with it again, sharing her thoughts and feelings. She reconnected with her neighbors, participating in community events and rebuilding the relationships that had been strained by her fear and isolation. She realized that she couldn't let the burglary define her life. She also decided to focus on forgiveness. She knew that holding on to anger and resentment would only prolong her suffering. She started by writing Billy a letter, expressing her pain and her disappointment, but also offering him a glimmer of hope. She didn't expect a response, but a few weeks later, she received a letter from Billy. He expressed his remorse for his actions and apologized for the harm he had caused. He said that he was using his time in prison to reflect on his mistakes and to make a positive change in his life. Mrs. Gable was moved by his words. She knew that forgiveness wouldn't happen overnight, but she was willing to start the journey. She never fully recovered her sense of security, but she learned to live with her fear. She found strength in her community, solace in her garden, and hope in the possibility of forgiveness. The red fiber had brought justice, but it was Mrs. Gable's own resilience that allowed her to heal. She knew that her life would never be quite the same, but she was determined to make it a good life, a life filled with love, joy, and peace. And slowly, painstakingly, she began to succeed. Detective Miller continued his work, solving other cold cases, bringing closure to other victims. He never forgot Mrs. Gable or the power of the tiny red fiber. He often thought about how such a small, insignificant clue could have such a profound impact on so many lives. He also thought about Billy, hoping that he was using his time in prison to learn from his mistakes and to turn his life around. He knew that everyone deserved a second chance, and he hoped that Billy would eventually earn that chance. Sarah, the forensic scientist, continued her work in the lab, meticulously analyzing evidence, one fiber, one fingerprint, one DNA sample at a time. She knew that her work was crucial in the pursuit of justice, and she took her responsibilities seriously. She often thought about Mrs. Gable, wondering how she was doing, hoping that she had found some peace. She knew that the tiny red fiber had played a significant role in solving the case, and she felt a sense of pride in her contribution. The story of Mrs. Gable and the red fiber became a legend within the police department, a testament to the power of persistence, dedication, and the importance of even the smallest clues. It was a reminder that even when a case seemed hopeless, there was always a chance that something could be discovered, something that could bring justice to the victim and hold the perpetrator accountable. The case also served as a reminder of the importance of community. The neighbors who supported Mrs. Gable, the police officers who investigated the case, the forensic scientist who analyzed the evidence, they all played a role in bringing the burglar to justice and helping Mrs. Gable to heal. In the end, the story of Mrs. Gable and the red fiber was a story of hope, resilience, and the power of the human spirit. It was a story that showed that even in the face of adversity, it was possible to find justice, forgiveness, and peace. And it all started with a tiny red fiber, clinging to a carpet, waiting to be discovered. Billy's time in prison was difficult, but he was determined to make the most of it. He enrolled in educational programs, earned his GED, and took vocational training courses. He also participated in therapy, confronting his past mistakes and learning how to make better choices. He often thought about Mrs. Gable, regretting the pain and suffering he had caused her. He knew that he could never fully repay her for what he had done, but he hoped that he could at least show her that he was truly sorry. He continued to write her letters, sharing his progress and expressing his remorse. He never asked for her forgiveness, but he hoped that she would eventually find it in her heart to forgive him. After serving his time, Billy was released from prison. He was determined to start a new life, to make amends for his past mistakes, and to become a productive member of society. He found a job working at a local construction company, where he learned valuable skills and earned a decent living. He stayed away from his old friends and avoided situations that could lead him back into trouble. He also reached out to Mrs. Gable, offering to help her with her garden or with any other tasks she might need assistance with. Mrs. Gable was hesitant at first, but she eventually agreed to let him help her. Billy proved to be a reliable and hardworking helper. He tended her garden, mowed her lawn, and helped her with household chores. He never talked about the past, but his actions spoke volumes. Over time, Mrs. Gable began to see Billy in a new light. She saw his remorse, his dedication, and his genuine desire to make amends. She realized that he had truly changed. One day, as they were working in the garden together, Mrs. Gable turned to Billy and said, "I forgive you, Billy." Billy was overcome with emotion. He thanked Mrs. Gable profusely, promising to never let her down again. From that day forward, Billy and Mrs. Gable formed an unlikely friendship. They shared stories, laughed together, and supported each other through difficult times. The red fiber had brought them together, but it was their shared humanity that allowed them to heal and to find peace. The past was never forgotten, but it no longer defined their lives. They had both found a way to move forward, to build a better future, and to create a world filled with forgiveness, compassion, and hope. The news of Billy and Mrs. Gable's friendship spread throughout the community. Some people were skeptical, questioning Mrs. Gable's judgment. But others were inspired by her capacity for forgiveness and Billy's commitment to change. The story became a symbol of hope, demonstrating that even the most unlikely people could find common ground and build a better future together. It was a reminder that everyone deserves a second chance and that forgiveness is possible, even in the face of great harm. Detective Miller and Sarah, the forensic scientist, were both deeply moved by the story. They had played a role in bringing justice to Mrs. Gable, but it was her own strength and resilience that had allowed her to heal and to find peace. Detective Miller often visited Mrs. Gable, sharing stories and offering his support. He admired her courage and her compassion. He knew that she was a truly remarkable woman. Sarah continued to work in the lab, knowing that her work could make a difference in people's lives. She was proud to be a part of the justice system, helping to bring closure to victims and to hold perpetrators accountable. The story of Mrs. Gable and the red fiber became a part of the fabric of the community, a reminder of the importance of justice, forgiveness, and hope. It was a story that would be told and retold for generations to come. And so, Mrs. Gable's cozy home, once a place of fear and violation, became a sanctuary of peace and forgiveness. The warm yellow walls now seemed to radiate with love and compassion. The sunshine streaming through the windows brought joy and hope. The creak of the floorboards was no longer a source of anxiety, but a reminder of the past and a celebration of the present. Mrs. Gable continued to tend her garden, sharing its beauty with her neighbors and with Billy. The friendly robin still visited, and she often chatted with it, sharing her thoughts and feelings. She knew that her life would never be quite the same, but she had learned to live with her past and to embrace the future. She had found strength in her community, solace in her garden, and hope in the possibility of forgiveness. And she was grateful for every day that she had been given. The red fiber had brought justice, but it was Mrs. Gable's own heart that had brought healing. And so, the tale of the unsolved burglary, the elderly woman, the persistent detective, the meticulous scientist, the troubled teenager, and the single red fiber came to its conclusion. It was a story that underscored the profound impact even the smallest details can have on the course of human lives. The red fiber, a seemingly insignificant speck, served as a potent reminder that justice often hinges on the meticulous work of forensic scientists and the unwavering dedication of law enforcement. It emphasized that every piece of evidence, no matter how minute, has the potential to unlock the truth and bring closure to victims of crime. Detective Miller's unwavering commitment to Mrs. Gable's case demonstrated the vital role that empathy and perseverance play in solving even the most challenging cold cases. His willingness to revisit the scene, to examine every detail with fresh eyes, ultimately led to the discovery of the fiber and the subsequent apprehension of Billy. Sarah's expertise in forensic science illuminated the power of scientific analysis in unraveling complex mysteries. Her ability to identify the specific type of acrylic fiber and trace it back to a particular brand of hoodie was instrumental in narrowing down the suspect pool and ultimately leading the police to Billy. Billy's transformation from a troubled teenager to a responsible adult showcased the potential for rehabilitation and the importance of offering second chances. His willingness to accept responsibility for his actions and his commitment to making amends inspired hope and demonstrated the power of forgiveness. Mrs. Gable's resilience in the face of adversity and her capacity for forgiveness served as a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Her willingness to forgive Billy and to offer him a second chance demonstrated the transformative power of compassion and the importance of community support. The story of the red fiber serves as a beacon of hope, reminding us that even in the darkest of times, justice can prevail, forgiveness can heal, and hope can endure. It underscores the importance of persistence, dedication, compassion, and community in creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to live a life filled with peace, joy, and purpose. And it all started with a single, tiny red fiber, clinging to a carpet, waiting to be discovered, a testament to the fact that even the smallest things can make the biggest difference.